What if the most powerful healing tool isn't something modern at all? What if it's something ancient, something people trusted long before hospitals, before pharmacies, before anything you've been taught to rely on? Before we go any further, subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear is the kind of knowledge most people never stop to question. Share this with someone close to you too, because once you understand this, you'll start seeing the world differently. Thousands of years ago, there were no pills, no prescriptions, no chemical formulas printed on bottles, and yet people still healed. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently enough to survive, to build civilizations, to pass knowledge forward. So the real question is, what were they using? Among all the plants they relied on, one stood out. Not because it was rare, not because it was hard to find, but because it worked, quietly, consistently, effectively. That plant is aloe vera. You've seen it before. Maybe sitting on a windowsill, maybe growing in someone's yard, maybe in a product, without you even realizing what it really is. But what most people don't understand is this. This wasn't just a plant. To ancient civilizations, it was something closer to a lifeline. In ancient Egypt, it was called the plant of immortality. Think about that. Not decoration, not food. Immortality. It was placed in tombs, used in rituals, reserved for healing and preservation. And it didn't stop there. Across Greece, India, China, different cultures, different languages, but the same plant kept appearing. Why? Because no matter where people lived, they discovered the same thing. It worked. Cut the leaf open, and inside is a clear, gel-like substance. Simple, natural, but packed with compounds that interact with the human body in ways that even today, science is still studying. People would apply it directly to burns, to wounds, to irritated skin. And over time, something became obvious. Healing improved, pain reduced, recovery accelerated. Not instantly, not magically, but noticeably. And when something works, people remember. That's how knowledge survives. Not through theory, through experience. But here's where the story changes. As centuries passed, something shifted. The world became more complex. Systems were built. Medicine evolved. Faster, stronger, more targeted. And slowly, plants like aloe vera began to lose their place. Not because they stopped working, but because something else took over. Something easier to package, easier to distribute, easier to control. And over time, what was once essential became optional. Then optional became forgotten. And forgotten became overlooked. Now here's the part most people never think about. If something was used for thousands of years across multiple civilizations without communication between them, doesn't that suggest something deeper? Because these people didn't share the same books. They didn't have the same teachers. They weren't connected. And yet they discovered the same plant, came to similar conclusions, used it in similar ways. That's not coincidence. That's pattern recognition. And patterns don't lie. But modern life moves fast, too fast to notice patterns like that. Instead, people are taught to trust what's given to them, what's packaged, what's approved. And again, modern medicine has its place. It's powerful. It saves lives. But that doesn't mean everything before it was irrelevant. And this is where awareness begins. Because once you realize something simple, natural, accessible, has been quietly sitting in the background, you start asking questions. Why wasn't this emphasized? Why do most people only see it as a cosmetic ingredient? Why does something with such a long history feel so minimized? Now let's slow this down and look closer. Inside the leaves of aloe vera are compounds like polysaccharides, vitamins, enzymes, each playing a role. Some help retain moisture, some support skin repair, some reduce irritation. It's not one single effect. It's a combination, a system working together. And that's something modern approaches often separate. Break it down, isolate it, recreate it. But nature doesn't isolate. Nature integrates. Everything works together. And maybe that's why something so simple can feel so effective. Now imagine this. Two people experience a minor burn. One reaches for a product they bought. The other cuts open a leaf and applies what's inside. Different approaches, same goal. But one of them is directly connected to something ancient. Something tested not in labs first, but in real life, over generations. And that difference matters. Because when knowledge comes from lived experience, it carries a different kind of weight. Now, here's something even more interesting. In recent years, research has started revisiting plants like aloe vera, not to replace modern medicine, but to understand it, to analyze what people already knew, but never explained scientifically. And what they're finding? It aligns. Not perfectly, not in every case, but enough to confirm. There was truth in that ancient knowledge. But here's the challenge. Even when people hear this, they don't always act on it. Because awareness doesn't automatically change behavior. It takes something more. Curiosity, willingness, a shift in perspective. And that's what separates someone who watches this from someone who actually sees it. Because once you start paying attention, you realize this isn't just about one plant. It's about what happens when knowledge fades, when something once essential becomes invisible, and what it takes to bring it back. If you've made it this far, you're already thinking differently than most people. Subscribe, because the next part goes deeper. How this ancient leaf is actually used today, what most people get wrong, and the hidden details that change everything. Now here's where things get even more real. Because understanding the history is one thing, but knowing how it actually fits into your life today, that's where most people get it wrong. Because the truth is, even though aloe vera is everywhere today, most people don't actually use it. They see it in products, creams, gels, bottles, processed, preserved, packaged. And without realizing it, they're experiencing a version of it, not the original. And that difference matters more than people think. Because when ancient cultures used this plant, they didn't extract it, refine it, and store it. They used it fresh, direct, alive. They would cut open the leaf and apply the gel immediately, while all its natural compounds were still active. No delay, no alteration. And that's something modern convenience has quietly replaced. Now think about this carefully. What happens to something natural when it's processed? Some properties stay, some weaken, some disappear completely. And while modern products can still be useful, they're not always identical to the original form people relied on for centuries. That's the first mistake, assuming all forms are the same. But they're not. Now here's the second mistake, and it's even more common. People expect instant results, immediate transformation, something dramatic. But that's not how nature usually works, and it never has. Plants like aloe vera work with the body, not against it. They support processes. They don't override them, which means the effects can feel subtle at first, gradual. But over time, noticeable. And that requires patience. Now, here's where things become more practical. Traditionally, one of the most common uses was for skin. Burns, irritation, dryness, minor wounds. The gel inside the leaf would be applied directly, and people noticed something simple but consistent: cooling, soothing, a reduction in discomfort. And in many cases, better recovery compared to doing nothing at all. Again, not magic, not instant healing, but support. Support. Because when the body is supported properly, it performs better on its own. Now let's go deeper into something most people never consider. Not all plants are the same, even within the same species. Where it grows, how it's treated, the environment it's exposed to. A plant growing in clean, natural conditions is very different from one grown with heavy chemicals or poor soil. Same name, different outcome. And this is something ancient users understood without needing scientific terms. They paid attention to the land, to the environment, to the source, because they knew what you take from nature is only as good as where it came from. Now compare that to today. Most people don't know where their products come from, how they're made, what's added, what's removed. And that gap creates distance from the original knowledge, but awareness brings it back. Now here's another detail most people miss. When you cut open a leaf of aloe vera, there's more than just the clear gel. There's also a yellowish layer near the outer part, and this part, it's not used the same way. In fact, in larger amounts, it can cause irritation. This is where precision matters. Because real knowledge isn't just about what to use, it's about what to avoid. Ancient practices included careful preparation, not just random use. Now think about how different that is from what most people do today. They hear something works and jump straight into using it. No context, no understanding, just imitation. And that's where mistakes happen, because nature rewards awareness, not shortcuts. Now, here's something even more interesting. Despite all the advancements in modern science, researchers are still studying plants like aloe vera, still trying to fully understand how its compounds interact with the body, still uncovering details that ancient people clearly experienced. And that raises a powerful question. If something so simple still isn't fully understood, what does that say about how much we've actually forgotten? Because it's easy to assume that progress means replacing the past, but sometimes progress is rediscovering it, looking back with new tools, new understanding, and realizing there was more truth there than we gave it credit for. Now imagine this. You walk into a store and see a shelf full of products labeled with the name aloe vera, different brands, different prices. But behind all of that is a single plant, simple, unchanged, still growing quietly, the same way it has for thousands of years. And that contrast is important, because it shows you the difference between the source and everything built around it. Now here's the shift. Once you understand that difference, you stop looking at things the same way. You start asking better questions. What am I actually using? Where did it come from? What was it originally? And those questions lead to something most people never reach: awareness, not just information, understanding. And once you have that, you don't go back. If you're still here, you're seeing something most people ignore. Subscribe, like, and share this, because the final part goes deeper into the biggest misconception about this ancient leaf, and the one detail that changes how you see natural healing completely. Now we reach the part most people never hear, because this is where everything you've been told starts to feel incomplete. The biggest misconception about aloe vera isn't that it doesn't work. It's that people think it's supposed to do everything. And that single misunderstanding is what causes most people to dismiss it, because they try it once, expect something dramatic, and when it doesn't instantly transform everything, they move on. But that was never its role, and it never was. Ancient knowledge didn't treat plants like miracle solutions. It treated them like tools, specific tools, used in the right situation, in the right way, for the right purpose. And when used like that, they worked consistently, quietly, effectively. But modern thinking often turns everything into extremes. Either something is powerful enough to replace everything, or it's useless. And the truth sits right in between. Now here's the detail that changes everything. Aloe vera was never meant to replace medicine. It was meant to support the body where it naturally could. That's a completely different role. And once you understand that, your expectations change. Instead of asking, will this fix everything? You start asking, where does this actually help? And that question leads to real understanding. Because when used correctly, this ancient leaf has always been most effective in specific areas: surface level irritation, minor burns, skin recovery, hydration support. Not internal diseases, not complex conditions, not everything. And accepting that limitation doesn't make it weaker, it makes it accurate. And accuracy is where trust comes from. Now here's something even deeper. When people in the past used aloe vera, they weren't just using a plant. They were engaging with their environment, observing, learning, adapting. There was a connection, a relationship, something modern life has slowly reduced. Because today most people don't interact with the source, they interact with the product. And that distance changes everything. When you're disconnected from where something comes from, you lose part of the understanding, part of the respect, part of the awareness. And without awareness, knowledge fades. That's how something used for thousands of years becomes something people barely think about, not because it stopped working, but because people stopped looking at it the same way. Now imagine something simple. You hold a fresh leaf of aloe vera in your hand. No label, no branding, no instructions, just a plant. And yet inside it is a system developed by nature over millions of years. Compounds working together, balanced, integrated, unchanged. That alone should make you pause. Because in a world full of complexity, sometimes the simplest things carry the deepest value, but only if you recognize it. Now here's the final shift. This wasn't just about aloe. It was never just about one plant. It was about what happens when knowledge is slowly replaced, when awareness is traded for convenience, when people stop asking where things come from. Because once that happens, you don't just lose information, you lose perspective. And perspective is everything. Because the moment you start seeing things differently, everything changes. You walk outside and notice what you ignored before. You look at plants differently. You question things more deeply. You become aware of what's been there all along. And that awareness, that's something no system can give you. It has to be developed, chosen, built over time. Now here's the question that stays with you after all of this. If something as simple as aloe vera has been quietly present for thousands of years, helping people, supporting them, then slowly fading into the background, what else has followed the same path? What else exists right now that people walk past every single day without ever realizing its value? Because once you start asking that question, you don't see the world the same way again. If you made it to the end, you're part of a small group of people willing to look deeper than the surface. Subscribe and share this with someone. Because sometimes the most powerful things were never meant to be sold. And the next time you see a simple plant sitting quietly in the corner, you might stop for a second and wonder, what else don't I know?